The cosmos remembers every rebellion, not in words, but in echoes of ki. Somewhere between light and destruction, there once existed a race whose blood sang only one song, to rise or to fall by their own strength. But what if they had never bowed to the tyrant of the stars? What if the Saiyans, proud children of battle, had never carried the mark of servitude under Frieza's rule? What if their destiny had remained their own, unbroken, untamed, unchained? In this divergent timeline, one single decision reshapes eternity. King Vegeta never sends emissaries to the Cold Empire. Frieza never learns their name, and the Saiyan flame burns freely, no longer a weapon of conquest, but a storm seeking its own horizon. Before the gods ever whispered of Ultra Instinct, before Goku's heart ever shattered under loss and hope, there was this, a tale of freedom, fire, and fate unbound. A legend of Saiyans who chose defiance over survival, and in doing so, altered the very music of the universe. Before we step into this alternate destiny, remember to join the journey, so our timelines may never fade into silence. The twin sons of planet Vegeta bled crimson that morning, not from battle, but from pride. Their light fell upon the citadel of the Saiyan throne, where a storm brewed not in the sky, but in the heart of a king. King Vegeta stood before the great window of obsidian glass, his reflection shimmering between the twin fires of dawn. His armor caught the light, gold and black, burnished by war and time, and his gaze burned deeper still. He was not yet the tyrant's pawn that history once remembered. He was a ruler who had glimpsed the shape of servitude and refused to wear it. The emissary from the Cold Empire kneeled behind him, trembling beneath a cloak too heavy for his cowardice. His words were smooth and venomous. The Lord Frieza offers protection, alliance, prosperity. The Saiyans will conquer worlds in his name and thrive under his shadow.
The king's laughter was low, hollow. It rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Extinction is the fate of those who forget who they are. His hand flickered with faint ki, blue-white and sharp as a blade. We do not kneel for safety, we fight for meaning. Outside, the Saiyan capital roared with life, 1,000 warriors training, shouting, colliding like sparks from a divine forge. They did not yet know that history itself was bending in that moment, that a single refusal would change the song of galaxies. King Vegeta walked past the envoy, stopping only to whisper as he passed. "Tell your lord, if he wishes to rule us, he must come and prove his throne with blood." The envoy's scream came only after the blast, a flash of ki that erased him from existence. The scent of burning air lingered. That night, the stars watched in silence as the king gathered his council. Among them was Bardock, a warrior known more for vision than for obedience. He stood apart, arms crossed, eyes narrow. "You've made your choice," Bardock said, "but Frieza is not a man. He's a storm." King Vegeta smiled faintly. "Then we become lightning." The council murmured, fear, pride, awe. It was not unity that bound them, but defiance. The Saiyans had always been conquerors, yet in this moment, they stood for something higher than power. Freedom. The right to die unbowed. Outside the palace, the air itself trembled. The Saiyan army assembled beneath the twin suns, their armor gleaming like obsidian fire. Mothers held their children tighter that night, sensing the wind shift. Warriors sharpened their instincts, whispering ancient oaths, not to a god, not to a master, but to the pride in their blood. And above it all, the king stared into the void of space. Somewhere out there, a tyrant named Frieza ruled with effortless cruelty, moving planets like pawns. But not this one, not today. Bardock approached him quietly. If he comes, it'll be war unlike anything we've known." King Vegeta nodded. "Then let it come. Every god needs to be reminded that even mortals can bleed." In that single moment, that single defiance, the Saiyan destiny diverged. And the universe, though it did not yet know, shivered at the ripple that would one day reach every corner of creation. The first war drums began to sound across the planet. The Saiyans, children of flame, were about to fight not for conquest, but for the right to exist without chains. The suns fell below the horizon, and the night bloomed red. Their roar echoed through the stars, defying the silence of gods. The night after the envoy's death was the calm before 1,000 storms. Planet Vegeta slept beneath a sky that seemed to hold its breath. The wind whispered through the towers of the capital like an ancient spirit, carrying the scent of metal, sweat, and fear. Inside his chamber, King Vegeta sat alone before the relic fire, a low-burning flame that had never been extinguished since the founding of their race. Every Saiyan ruler had fed it with a drop of blood, a symbol of strength given to the past. He stared into it now, seeing visions in the flicker, empires rising and falling, warriors screaming into the void, the cold gleam of a throne among the stars. Frieza. The name tasted like venom, even unspoken. They had heard whispers for years, the cold empire expanding like frost across the void, consuming worlds with quiet, efficient cruelty. No resistance had survived long enough to tell the tale. But Saiyans were different. Their nature, their curse, was to evolve under pressure. The harder they were struck, the brighter they burned. King Vegeta rose, walked toward the great mural etched into his chamber wall. It showed their ancestors, warriors of planet Sadala before its fall. The ancient prophecy was carved there, half forgotten, half feared. When the blood of the warrior burns brighter than the sun, the gods shall tremble. He touched the carving, and something in him understood. This was not rebellion, it was reclamation. The Saiyans had lived too long chasing other people's wars, other people's empires. They were meant for something older, something divine. Far away, in a small settlement beneath the cliffs, Bardock gazed up at the same stars. His scouter blinked faintly, readings of unfamiliar energy signatures moving near the outer atmosphere. He clenched his jaw. So it begins. Ginny stepped beside him, her hands clasped together, worry softening her voice. "You told the king the truth, but do you think he'll listen when the Cold Empire sends their fleets?" Bardock's eyes glowed faintly in the starlight. He already knows. He just doesn't care. He turned toward the house, where a small pod waited, unassigned, newly built. Inside it lay a crib, empty but ready. "If they come, I'll make sure at least one of us survives." The horizon flared with sudden light, 1,000 ships piercing the void. The invasion had begun. Frieza's generals descended not for diplomacy but for extermination. Columns of fire tore through the outer cities. The ground shook as Saiyan warriors launched into the sky, meeting death head-on with screams of defiance. King Vegeta's command echoed through every scouter, every heartbeat. No surrender, no retreat for the pride of all Saiyans. The battle was chaos made flesh. Energy waves carved craters through mountains. Ki flared like suns colliding, painting the sky in colors unseen. Bardock's squadron tore through the enemy ranks, wild, relentless. His vision flickered again, flashes of something beyond battle, a child, grown, with eyes that carried both rage and peace. A storm, wrapped in gentleness. He gritted his teeth. "So that's what you're showing me, huh? Then I'll make it real." In orbit, Frieza's flagship loomed like a black moon. The tyrant himself had not yet moved. He watched from afar, amused. "Saiyans," he whispered, swirling his wine. "Such noisy creatures. Perhaps they deserve a demonstration."
He raised a single finger, and a sphere of death began to bloom, massive, silent, unholy. But this time, destiny flinched. For on the planet's surface, something ancient stirred, a sound beneath sound. It was not a scream, but a resonance, the combined key of thousands of warriors refusing to die. The vibration rose, merging, fusing, until the very air trembled with a roar that split the sky. King Vegeta stood at the heart of it all, his aura igniting like a supernova. His voice thundered through every mind on the planet. You want to see extinction? Come and earn it. The gathered energy surged outward, a dome of raw willpower that collided with the descending death ball. For a moment, the stars dimmed. Time itself hesitated. Then light, pure, blinding light. The explosion shook galaxies. When the dust settled, the planet still stood, cracked, burning, but alive. And somewhere in the silence, Bardock fell to one knee, laughing through blood. He did it. The stubborn bastard did it. Above the broken horizon, the twin suns rose again, pale, uncertain, yet undying. The Saiyans had survived their first god. And Frieza, for the first time in his existence, felt something new. Fear. In the silence that followed the storm, the stars wept light over a wounded world. Planet Vegeta was scarred, its cities half collapsed, its soil scorched into black glass. Yet from the ruins rose a new sound, not the cries of despair, but the training grunts of warriors rebuilding their destiny. For the first time, the Saiyans have faced the abyss and remained standing, but victory, as always, came with the whisper of consequence. Bardock stood amid the ruins of the battlefield, his armor cracked, his scouters shattered, his eyes reflecting a sky reborn from ash. He could feel the residue of Frieza's energy still lingering in the atmosphere, the ghost of power too vast for mortals, and yet it had not won. King Vegeta had survived, though weakened. His defiance had turned into legend overnight. Across the galaxy, stories spread of a race that had rejected a tyrant and lived. Entire civilizations whispered their name like prayer and warning alike, Saiyan. But the king knew the cost. The Cold Empire would not forgive rebellion. It would return stronger. Frieza was a god in all but name, and gods, when angered, did not simply destroy, they erased. In the outskirts of the capital, Bardock worked in silence, his hands blackened with oil and metal. He was building something not for war, but for the future. A pod small enough to carry an infant through the stars. Inside it, a heart would beat that the universe was not yet ready for. Janae watched from the doorway, her eyes soft but heavy. "You think this is what the king would want?" Bardock didn't answer at first. The hum of the pod's systems filled the air. Finally, he said quietly, "It's not about the king anymore. It's about what comes after him." He turned, gaze distant. The war's not over. It's just sleeping. The night sky shimmered with a passing comet, bright, cold, and strange. It wasn't part of any known orbit, yet it passed close enough that the entire planet could see its white flame trail across the heavens. The elders called it the Comet of Rebirth. To Bardock, it felt like a message. He could feel something in its key, calm, ancient, almost divine. And in that light, Janae placed a small child into his arms. Kakarot, only days old, eyes closed, aura faint but steady. A Saiyan, yes, but something else too. His heartbeat carried a rhythm different from any warrior Bardock had ever met. He smiled faintly, though it trembled with exhaustion. "He's too gentle for this world." Janae's voice broke softly. "Then give him another one." Bardock nodded. With trembling hands, he placed the child into the pod, sealing the hatch. The coordinates were set for a distant blue planet, one rich with life, low in power, invisible to Frieza's empire. Earth. As the pod began to hum, the comet's light brightened, almost as if acknowledging the act. Bardock looked up at it and felt the strange pull of fate. "You'll see it, won't you, kid? You'll see the world I couldn't." He pressed the launch key. The pod rose silently into the night, cutting through clouds of key residue and ash. Its light trailed across the horizon, merging with the comet's glow. For a heartbeat, they became one, star and child, before vanishing into the void. Bardock's scouter blinked once. Incoming signal. Cold Empire fleet. Massive. His heart sank. They're back already. He activated his communicator. "King Vegeta, it's Bardock. They're approaching. Hundreds this time." Static. Then the king's weary voice. "Then we fight again." Bardock looked at the empty sky where his son had disappeared. Not this time. He turned toward the horizon where enemy ships were descending, their engines screaming through the upper atmosphere. His aura began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, burning gold-red. The wind around him trembled. Somewhere deep in his blood, something awakened. Not full transformation, but a memory of one. Rage turned clean. Will turned luminous. He smiled one last time. Let's see if mortals can make gods bleed again. The next explosion could be seen from orbit. From the window of his throne chamber, King Vegeta watched the sky ignite, knowing exactly who it was. Bardock, you fool. But even he could feel it, the comet's energy still lingering, its path carved through time itself. And far away, beyond galaxies, a tiny pod streaked through the void toward an unknown world. Inside it, a child slept, unaware that he carried the future of a race that refused to kneel. The days that followed the second invasion were written in blood and silence. The Saiyans had survived once more, but only barely. The air above planet Vegeta shimmered with invisible tension, the residue of God's anger and mortal defiance.
King Vegeta stood atop the great terrace of the royal palace, his cape torn, his body bruised, yet his gaze remained fierce. The banners of the Saiyan clans flapped in the wind, scorched, tattered, but still standing. Around him, soldiers and survivors rebuilt their shattered world, though none spoke of peace. Peace was not for warriors. Peace was merely the space between wars. He looked to the sky, where the last fragments of Frieza's fleet had vanished into the void. They had retreated, a concept the tyrant had never known before. The king's voice was quiet, but the air itself seemed to bow when he spoke. "He'll return." Beside him stood Paragus, ever the loyal general, his armor barely holding together. "Then we'll be ready, my king." But even as he said it, he knew the lie within his words. Frieza was no ordinary enemy. He was destruction given form, patience sharpened by time. To defy him once was glory. To defy him twice would be suicide. King Vegeta's eyes narrowed. No, not ready for war. Ready for evolution. Those words echoed across the palace halls. The king began something no Saiyan had ever attempted. A transformation not of body, but of spirit. The Saiyan academies changed. No longer did they train only for brute strength. Under royal command, warriors began meditating, learning to sense ki not as rage, but as rhythm. For centuries, Saiyans had drawn power from fury. Now they learned to balance it with stillness. It was chaos at first, frustration, disbelief, ridicule, but some began to feel it. A strange calm beneath the storm, a stillness that made their power steadier, sharper. The king called it Satori Ki, enlightenment through will. And while his people struggled to learn, One distant soul carried that potential unknowingly through the stars. The pod that held Kakarot drifted beyond known systems, passing through light years of silence. Its engines hummed softly, the child within dreaming without knowing. Somewhere in that infinite dark, the comet that had guided his departure continued its arc, as though watching, waiting. The pod's course bent slightly as it neared a cluster of gravitational storms, remnants of an old collapsed star. Inside, the infant stirred. For a moment, his tiny key pulsed, flaring unconsciously. The pod's sensors flickered, recalibrated, and slipped past the storms unharmed. Fate itself seemed to bend to his pulse. Back on planet Vegeta, Bardock's absence was felt like a missing heartbeat. Jean stood each night beneath the same stars watching for the comet that had carried her son away. Every time it appeared, faint and far, she whispered, "Grow strong, but not cruel."
King Vegeta, too, could not escape the pull of that light. It became a symbol of something beyond his reach, a reminder that even kings could not rule destiny. He began seeing it in his dreams, a child born of fire and mercy, one who would rise not to conquer, but to awaken. The king awoke one night from such a dream, drenched in sweat, his heart racing. He walked to the relic fire once more. What are we becoming? Warriors or something greater? A voice answered from the dark, old, weary, wise. The court sage, Radane, stepped forward. His hair was white as dust, his power faint but clear. "The line between God and mortal is choice, my king. You chose defiance. The child will choose compassion. Together, those paths lead to transcendence." King Vegeta turned to him sharply. "What child?" Radane only smiled, eyes reflecting comet light through the palace window. "The one you already sent away." And then he was gone, as if the night itself had swallowed him up. The king looked out at the stars again, jaw clenched. Kakarot. He had heard that name before, whispered in reports from Bardock's final transmission logs. He didn't know why, but the sound of it stayed with him, like the beginning of a word he would never finish. In the following years, the Saiyans changed. Slowly, impossibly, they grew not just in strength, but in awareness. The children trained not only their fists, but their minds. The strongest among them began feeling strange sensations, glimpses of distant worlds, the faint hum of divine ki. The galaxy took notice. The Kaioshin, far above in their serene realms, watched the rise of this mortal flame with wary curiosity. "They are walking a path they were never meant to," one murmured. And far, far beyond their sight, Beerus stirred in his long sleep. A faint twitch, a ripple through the void. Something was calling to him, something bold enough to disturb a god of destruction. The comet passed Earth's orbit at last. The pod fell through the sky like a second star, vanishing into clouds above a mountain forest. Inside, a baby opened his eyes, and somewhere across the universe, the old king smiled faintly, without knowing why. The Saiyans had planted their final seed, a hope that burned quietly in the infinite night. Years passed like the slow grinding of galaxies, and the legend of the Saiyan defiance spread through every corner of known space. What began as rebellion became myth, whispered among slaves, sung by soldiers, feared by tyrants. The cold empire, once absolute, had fractured under its own arrogance. Frieza's fleets rebuilt in silence. His father, King Cold, watched from the shadows, displeased by his son's failure. Yet neither could erase the memory of that single act of defiance, a mortal king who had dared to stand against a god. And while they plotted vengeance, the Saiyans evolved. Planet Vegeta became a forge, not of weapons, but of will. Warriors meditated beneath waterfalls of molten rock, learned to focus ki not through hatred, but through rhythm. The air itself pulsed with new energy, sharper, quieter, divine in its restraint. Even the youngest of them could feel it, the hum of awareness beneath the roar of rage. King Vegeta stood before his people, addressing them beneath the burning sky. Our enemy seeks domination. We seek understanding. They wish to rule the stars. We wish to become them. The crowd roared in response, but not in chaos. It was reverent, unified. The Saiyan spirit, once wild and scattered, had become something deeper, a storm with purpose. Yet in the halls of the palace, the king's son, Prince Vegeta, grew restless. He was the sharpest blade of his generation, proud, brilliant, merciless. But he struggled with his father's teachings. Meditation bored him. Stillness felt like weakness. He wanted the rush of combat, the taste of blood and victory. Why speak of harmony when the universe only respects power? He asked one night. The king regarded him with weary eyes. Because, my son, power without purpose becomes servitude. He turned away, fists trembling. I don't need philosophy to be a god. The king sighed. Then you will never become one. Outside, the stars shimmered, unaware that both were right in ways neither could yet understand. Meanwhile, on the distant planet Earth, a small child named Kakarot, renamed by his adoptive grandfather as Goku, grew up beneath gentle skies. He knew nothing of war or destiny. He trained with laughter, fought with joy, and slept beneath the trees. The comet that had guided him appeared above him often, like a silent guardian. Yet within him the Saiyan blood pulsed, ancient and waiting. His innocence was the echo of his father's final wish, a warrior born not of rage, but of heart. Back among the stars, the balance of power began to shift. As the cold empire weakened, other empires rose. Tuffle remnants, machine legions, planetary unions. The universe was becoming something new, unpredictable. And in that chaos, the Saiyans found freedom. They no longer conquered for others, they explored. They built outposts on moons, trade stations among nebulae. But with freedom came temptation and fear. One night, the king stood upon the balcony of his tower, watching the auroras dance over the poles. Bardock's old friend Tora stood beside him, battle-scarred but loyal. The people speak of peace now, Tora said quietly, but peace feels like a lie. It's too quiet. The king nodded. That's because the gods have not yet answered. Tora frowned. You think they'll come? They're already watching, the king murmured, eyes narrowing at the heavens. The Kaioshin, the destroyer, perhaps even the angels. Mortals were never meant to touch divine essence. Yet here we are. A sudden tremor ran through the air, faint but unmistakable, a cosmic hum that resonated in the bones. The king turned his gaze upward. The stars flickered. In a distant corner of creation, Beerus opened his eyes. It had been eons since a mortal's energy had reached his awareness. He sat up slowly, yellow eyes glowing in the darkness of his realm. Saiyans, he whispered, almost amused. Still making noise, are they? Whis appeared beside him, smiling faintly. They've learned something remarkable, my lord. Balance. Their ki is evolving. Beerus yawned, stretching like a bored god. Balance? Mortals don't balance. They burn. Whis's tone turned curious. Perhaps these do both. Beerus looked at him sharply. Explain.
Whis gestured, and a vision shimmered in the air. Planet Vegeta, radiant with life, its people shining like small suns. They've turned defiance into art, rage into awareness. They've begun to touch a power they don't yet understand.
Beerus watched, silent for once. For the first time in a long eternity, a hint of interest stirred behind his amused mask. Then maybe it's time I wake up properly. Across the void, King Vegeta felt it, like an unseen gaze upon his soul. His ki flared instinctively. "He's coming," he whispered. Tora stiffened. "Who?" The king looked to the stars. "Judgment." The night trembled with the first breath of the divine. The silence before a god's arrival is not peace. It is the moment the universe inhales, unsure whether it will exhale again. Planet Vegeta's sky shimmered with restless auroras, as if the world itself sensed the presence older than time. The warriors could feel it in their bones, a pressure that bent space, a rhythm that turned their pi unstable. It wasn't fear, it was reverence laced with dread. In the palace, King Vegeta stood motionless beside the relic fire. The flames no longer danced, they bowed. So he awakens. Whis descended first, a streak of tranquil light that painted the capital in ethereal blue. His staff touched the soil, and for a moment, every living being felt calm, unnaturally calm, as if their souls were being weighed. He smiled gently, eyes closed, as though listening to a distant melody. "Mortals who dream of godhood, how rare and how dangerous." Behind him came the ripple, soft, soundless, infinite. Beerus, the god of destruction, stepped into the mortal realm. His very breath cracked the air, his presence dissolving gravity itself. He stretched lazily, gaze sweeping across the world like a cat observing insects. "So, this is the little world that made the noise." The king approached with deliberate slowness, every movement precise. He bowed, not out of fear, but respect. "Lord Beerus." The god tilted his head, amused. "Ah, you know me. That saves time. Tell me, King Vegeta, why does your planet hum with power not born of rage? Mortals rarely learn stillness before death." The king met his gaze unflinching. "Because death has visited us twice already, my lord. We learn to listen to silence before it arrives." Whis chuckled softly. "How poetic for a warrior race." Beerus circled him, tail flicking lazily. "Poetry doesn't interest me. Balance does." He stopped, ears twitching. "Show me this Satori key I keep hearing about. Impress me, or I'll erase this curiosity before it becomes a nuisance." The king nodded once. The palace trembled as his aura rose, not wild, not burning, but serene and sharp, like sunlight reflecting off a blade. The energy spread in controlled waves, harmonizing with the pulse of the planet. It was not power in the mortal sense. It was awareness given form. Beerus watched, arms crossed. His expression remained unreadable. "Interesting. But tell me, mortal, what drives you to this?" The king's voice was low, steady. "Freedom." "Freedom?" Beerus's ears perked. "From what?" "From fear, from gods, from destiny itself." A long pause. Then a soft laugh, quiet but lethal. "You think defying gods makes you free?" The king's aura flickered. "No, but understanding them might." That answer gave the universe pause.
Even Whiss's smile deepened slightly, intrigued. Beerus stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You are either a fool or the first mortal I've met worth remembering." His hand rose, slow, deliberate. The king braced himself, not to attack, but to stand unbroken. For a heartbeat, reality itself trembled between destruction and revelation. Then Beerus lowered his hand. "Very well. You've earned your breath, for now." Relief spread through the atmosphere like a sigh. The god turned his gaze toward the stars. "But your evolution is unsettling. I've seen mortals reach for the divine before. It always ends the same." Whis tilted his head. "You mean destruction?" "No," Beerus said softly. "Regret." With that, he vanished, a violet ripple through the air. Only Whis remained, smiling faintly. "Your people walk a dangerous path, King Vegeta. When mortals touch the divine begins to question itself. That never ends quietly."
The king's reply was a whisper. "We don't seek quiet, Angel. Only truth." Whis chuckled. "Then may your truth not burn too brightly." He too disappeared. The world felt empty again, but changed, as though every atom remembered what it had just seen. The Saiyans went about their training, but the energy in the air was different now, cautious, searching, uncertain. In the years that followed, their civilization reached its peak. Their warriors mastered new depths of ki. Their scholars explored the mysteries of space-time. But beneath the triumph, something unseen was brewing, a slow fracture in their unity. Prince Vegeta grew older, stronger, colder. He surpassed every warrior on the planet, even his father, but the stillness that the king had tried to teach him never took root. His power burned too fiercely to be calm. He saw peace as decay. He saw balance as weakness. "The gods fear us," he once told his comrades, "and when gods fear mortals, empires fall." Those words spread like fire among the restless young warriors. Pride turned to arrogance. Harmony twisted into hunger. King Vegeta watched his son from afar, feeling the inevitability of destiny creeping closer again. "The stronger the light," he murmured, "the darker the shadow." And far away, among the stars, Frieza smiled within the heart of his rebuilt empire. He had been silent too long, patient beyond measure. The scar the Saiyans had given him never healed. He stood before the window of his flagship, his tail swaying lazily. "Let the monkeys grow fat with glory. The higher they climb," his smile turned thin and cruel, "the more beautiful their fall." The war of empires had begun, not yet in weapons, but in will. And this time, the universe itself would choose a side. It began as a whisper through the cosmic winds, the sound of mortals nearing the realm of gods. The Kais heard it in their meditations. The angels felt it in the tremor of creation. Mortals, the Saiyans, had touched something forbidden and refused to let go. On planet Vegeta, the air no longer hummed with war drums. It pulsed with transcendence. Energy no longer burned violently. It shimmered, alive, aware. The Saiyans had entered an age of revelation. In the heart of the capital, beneath a vast sky of burning auroras, King Vegeta stood before his people one last time. The years had etched lines into his face, but his gaze remained sharp as ki itself. His voice carried the tone of prophecy, not command.
"We have conquered fear, and in doing so, we have conquered death. But beware, Power untempered by humility becomes the seed of ruin. Some listened in reverence. Others, like his son, turned away. Prince Vegeta, now grown into his prime, stood at the edge of the gathering. His aura flickered like a caged storm, brilliant, unstable, dangerous. He had inherited not just his father's strength, but his pride multiplied by ambition. He whispered to himself, almost mockingly, "Humility doesn't win battles, father. Power does." The words were venom, but beneath them a trace of sorrow lingered. Later that night, the prince stood alone upon the cliffside where the twin suns met at the horizon. He could feel it, the weight of destiny pressing against his chest. His father's ideals felt like a cage, and somewhere beyond the stars he could sense another call, a darker one. It was Frieza. From the shadows of the void, the Emperor's voice echoed across encrypted frequencies, soft, patient, venomous. "Ah, Prince Vegeta, you shine quite brightly these days. Tell me, has your father taught you how to rule, or merely how to bow to gods in mortal skin?" Vegeta's fist tightened. "You have no right to speak of my father." "Oh, but I do. After all, I once offered him everything: dominion, eternity, power beyond imagination. And what did he give me in return? Defiance, a trait that runs in your blood, it seems. But tell me, little prince, how long will you live in his shadow?" The air around Vegeta crackled. "You think I'd serve you?" "I think," Frieza said softly, "that you already serve something. Whether it's your father's pride or your god's silence, you are still a slave. I am simply offering you truth." The line cut. The stars went quiet again. But the poison had already taken root. Meanwhile, King Vegeta meditated within the sacred chamber. His aura glowed faintly, merging with the energy of the planet itself. He had felt the disturbance in his son's ki, and it filled him with a sorrow only kings could know, the kind born of love twisted by destiny. He opened his eyes and whispered, "Even gods cannot save us from ourselves."
That night, he dreamed of a throne floating in the void, and upon it sat his son, not in armor, but in light. Around him, galaxies bowed, yet his eyes were empty. When he awoke, the comet was in the sky again, the same one that had once carried Kakarot away. Its light washed over the palace walls like memory reborn. He watched it with quiet awe, realizing that the comet's cycle had returned exactly 15 years later. And somewhere beneath that same sky, on a small blue planet far away, a young man looked up at the same comet and smiled. Goku, Kakarot, now grown, stood upon a mountain peak, the wind in his hair, the stars above like distant friends. He didn't know why the comet filled him with warmth, only that it did. He could feel it in his soul, the pull of something greater calling to him. He clenched his fists. "Someday, I'll reach it." The universe, vast and ancient, listened. Back on planet Vegeta, King Vegeta summoned his son to the throne room. The tension between them was no longer hidden. "You've been restless," the king said. "Your ki trembles with conflict." The prince smirked, arms crossed. "I've been growing. Isn't that what you wanted?" "I wanted evolution, not corruption." Their auras flared, gold and crimson, intertwining. The throne chamber shuddered.
I will not be contained by your peace, Vegeta spat. We are Saiyans, warriors. You've turned us into monks. And yet, the king said quietly, you've never been stronger. The prince hesitated, just for a heartbeat, but then turned away. Strength without victory is weakness. The king closed his eyes. Then perhaps you'll learn what victory truly costs. As the prince left, the comet's light flickered across his armor, a reflection of two paths diverging under the same sky. And beyond the stars, Frieza's fleets began to move once more.
This time, not for conquest, for vengeance. When Frieza's armadas emerged from the void, they no longer came with declarations or demands. They came in silence, a silence more terrifying than any roar. It was the silence of a god insulted. The first signal reached planet Vegeta during the dawn drills. A dozen moons on the edge of their system flickered out, as if erased from existence. No explosion, no trace, only emptiness where celestial bodies once spun. The Saiyan astronomers stared in horror. King Vegeta knew instantly. He's begun. The throne room darkened as a hologram flickered to life. Frieza's image, serene and smiling, his voice smooth as poisoned silk. Your Majesty, he said, almost tenderly, it seems you have built quite the civilization. How tragic it would be if something so luminous were to be extinguished. The king stood, fists clenched, aura trembling with restrained fury. You'll find that light burns hotter than before, Frieza. The tyrant's crimson eyes narrowed. Let's test that, shall we? The image dissolved. Moments later, the heavens opened. Columns of violet fire descended through the atmosphere, energy cannons capable of splitting worlds. The ground split apart, oceans boiled, cities vanished in screams of brilliance. Yet, even as destruction fell, the Saiyans rose. Across the planet, warriors ignited like living stars, their ki harmonizing through the air. Thousands fought in unison, each movement a note in a greater symphony. Where rage once ruled, now there was purpose. Their battle was no longer chaos, it was prayer through power. King Vegeta led from the front, his armor shattered, his aura golden white. He clashed with Frieza's generals, erasing them with calm precision. Each blow was not vengeance, it was declaration. From orbit, Frieza watched with narrowed eyes. They've learned. Control. He smiled faintly, but there was no amusement in it. How delightful. He rose from his throne, the stars bending beneath his power. Then let's see what enlightenment tastes like when it burns. He extended his palm toward the planet, and in that instant, the cosmos seemed to hold its breath. But before he could strike, a surge of ki exploded from below, a light so pure, so immense that even Frieza blinked. King Vegeta's voice thundered through space. We will not bow. The energy sphere collided with Frieza's own, the two forces grinding against each other, their shockwaves rippling through galaxies. For a moment, the god of destruction himself might have paused to watch. The explosion that followed was unlike anything before it. Not destruction, but transformation. The blast disintegrated Frieza's attack and illuminated the entire quadrant in golden fire. When the light faded, King Vegeta still stood. His aura was no longer mortal. It shimmered between gold and white, laced with divine resonance. The Saiyans below felt it. A vibration in their hearts, an awakening in their blood. Some ascended mid-battle, glowing with the same transcendent light. The transformation was not Super Saiyan as history once knew it. It was older, quieter, the Saiyan God. But the cost was written in the king's trembling hands. His mortal body strained against divinity. Veins of light burned across his skin.
In orbit, Frieza stared, momentarily speechless. Then came the laughter, low, incredulous, hateful. A god, you? He lifted his hand, golden energy condensing into a sphere of pure annihilation. Then die as one. The attack struck like judgment. The king met it head-on, his aura roaring, the planet trembling beneath his defiance. For minutes, or perhaps eternity, they clashed, energy grinding, space folding, time weeping. And then, silence. When the smoke cleared, Frieza's flagship drifted, cracked but intact. Frieza himself hovered, blood staining his smile. Below him, planet Vegeta still glowed faintly, half in ruin, half in resurrection. The king knelt in the burning ruins of his citadel, his breath shallow, his light fading. He looked up at the sky, at the comet now blazing brighter than ever, and smiled. It seems you were right, Bardock. The child carries the rest. As his aura dimmed, the comet's light expanded, spilling across the heavens. It reached distant worlds, even Earth, where a young man training beneath a waterfall suddenly looked up. Goku felt a strange warmth in his chest. His heartbeat quickened. What is this feeling?
A voice, faint, ancient, echoed through his soul. Remember who you are. For a brief second, the sky above him glowed red and gold. Back on the dying world, the king whispered his final vow. Let the gods remember our fire. The comet passed one last time, and when its light faded, the universe felt emptier, but not silent. Somewhere in the void, a ripple of that divine energy escaped the dying planet, drifting, searching, waiting for the one whose soul could bear it. And that ripple found its way to Earth, where destiny was quietly awakening. It began as a whisper in the wind, faint, ancient, familiar. On a quiet world far from the ashes of Saiyan glory, a man opened his eyes beneath the morning sun. Goku had dreamt of fire. Not chaos, not battle, but a great fire that hummed like music. It didn't burn, it breathed. In it, he saw faces he'd never known, a proud king standing against the stars, a warrior laughing through blood, a world wrapped in red light. He awoke with tears on his cheeks and didn't know why. The forest around him was peaceful. Birds sang, the waterfall shimmered, yet the air felt charged, as if some ancient rhythm pulsed beneath the earth. He arose slowly, feeling his heartbeat echo with the planets. His ki flared, bright, pure, and for a moment, the world seemed to sing back. He didn't know that the comet that had guided him as a child had finally reached its end, and its final light had entered him. Elsewhere, across the cosmos, the news of planet Vegeta's destruction spread like wildfire. The Cold Empire declared victory, though the cost had been immense. Frieza's fleets limped through the void, and though he claimed triumph, his eyes were haunted. The image of that last battle, of a mortal touching divinity, burned behind his lids like a curse. King Vegeta, he muttered in the solitude of his ship, staring into the starlight. He clenched his fist, energy crackling. Then I will destroy everything that bears your name, until the stars themselves forget you ever existed. Yet the universe did not forget. The resonance of the Saiyan god lingered like an eternal chord. The Kais whispered about it, Beerus dreamed of it.
Even the angels spoke its name softly, not as defiance, but as prophecy.
One day, a mortal would surpass destruction itself. On Earth, time flowed quietly. Goku grew, fought, laughed, loved. His battles became legend. He faced tyrants, machines, gods, and each time he grew stronger, not from hatred, but from purpose. Yet something in him always ached, like a melody unfinished. He had felt it during his clash with Frieza, when his rage had turned golden, when he had stood on the edge of oblivion and felt something greater than victory. Remembrance. That golden light was not just power, it was inheritance. In the silence after that battle, when the ocean stilled and the smoke cleared, he remembered the dream again. The king who had knelt not in defeat, but in peace. We do not kneel for safety, we fight for meaning. The words surfaced like a voice from another lifetime. Years passed, universes collided, Goku faced gods and angels in the very embodiment of time. He reached Ultra Instinct, the stillness his ancestors had once touched, and in that state, he finally understood. It was not the technique that mattered, it was the silence within it. The same silence his father had found when he sent him away. The same silence his king had faced when he met a god and refused to break. He had become the echo of all their choices, the living memory of a race that had chosen freedom over fear. But there was one last test. During meditation on the peak of a distant mountain, Goku felt it, a pulse in the universe, deep and ancient, a call. It was neither dark nor light, it was everything. He opened his eyes, and before him stood a figure woven of starlight and flame. The king, not of flesh, but of essence, ki made memory. His aura was calm, infinite. Goku stood silently. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, his voice both distant and near. "You already know." Something inside Goku stirred, not fear, not awe, but recognition. "You're me."
The king shook his head. "I am we, every soul that burned before you, every choice that refused the chain. You are the song we left unfinished." Goku's aura flickered, his ki trembling under the weight of truth. "Then what am I supposed to do?" The king's eyes softened. "Finish it." And then he was gone, dissolving into wind and light. Goku stood alone, the horizon stretching infinite before him. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and let his ki rise, not in fury, not in defense, but in harmony. It spread through the air, the ground, the stars. The planet itself vibrated with life. Somewhere, Beerus stirred, Whis smiled faintly. The universe listened. The light around Goku shifted, gold, red, blue, silver, then clear, not form, but essence, not rage, but understanding. He whispered softly, "So this is what you all were trying to reach." His aura expanded until it covered the sky, a quiet flame that neither consumed nor faded. It simply was. And through the endless cosmos, that flame became music. A song without words, a memory of will, the Saiyan song, the song of the infinite flame. The mountains trembled beneath the quiet roar of awakening. Goku's aura had grown beyond color, beyond form, transparent, yet boundless. The trees bent toward him as though drawn by gravity, their leaves glimmering in the ethereal light. It wasn't the energy of destruction, nor the heat of battle. It was stillness given voice. The same stillness that had once defied Frieza's wrath, the same that had stood before Beerus without fear. His breath slowed. The earth around him pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The rivers sang. The wind carried whispers of every Saiyan who had ever lived. And far across the stars, beings of power turned their gaze toward the blue planet.
In his palace, Beerus stood at the edge of his garden, tail flicking with faint irritation. "Whis," he murmured, eyes half-lidded. "Something's happening again, isn't it?" Whis smiled faintly, staff shimmering. "Yes, my lord, the resonance has returned." The god's eyes opened, golden and sharp. "Saiyans," he hissed the word like a memory, then tilted his head. "No, not Saiyans, a Saiyan." Whis nodded. "He's done it, reached beyond instinct, beyond godhood. It seems your prediction was correct. They burn until they remember they are light." Beerus crossed his arms, gaze distant. "So the boy became what his king could not?" "Perhaps," Whis said softly, "or perhaps the king's will merely needed a vessel kind enough to carry it." The god's ears twitched. "Will he challenge me?" Whis' smile deepened. "No, he won't need to." Back on Earth, the air shimmered as Goku floated a few inches above the ground. His expression was neither stern nor joyful. It was peace, the kind found only after losing everything worth clinging to. He looked toward the horizon where the sun met the ocean. So, this is what it means, to understand. In that moment, he felt the weight of countless lives pressing gently against his heart. His father, Bardock, standing with a grin, his king kneeling before light, his enemies now quiet shades, his friends whose faith had carried him this far. The comet appeared again, faint but visible in the daylight sky, its final return. He reached his hand upward. "You've been following me all this time, haven't you?" The air responded with warmth. For a heartbeat, he saw them, all of them, ancestral spirits burning like constellations, their voices layered into one. "We are the fire that refused to kneel." Goku smiled faintly, tears catching in the glow. "Then I'll keep it burning."
His ki rose, not violently, but naturally, like breath becoming light. The aura expanded until the oceans reflected it, until even the gods above could feel its hum. It wasn't Ultra Instinct anymore. It wasn't Super Saiyan. It was something beyond names. The energy didn't fight gravity. It embraced it, becoming part of everything. Grass grew where his feet had stood. The sky cleared. Even the smallest insects paused, as if aware of something divine passing through their moment. Whis watched from afar, a hand resting lightly on his staff. A mortal who reached divinity without asking for it. How rare! Beerus's voice was almost grudgingly respectful. He did it without arrogance. "That," Whis said, "is why he could." For the first time, Beerus looked uncertain. "So what happens now?" Whis gazed down at the earth, his voice soft. "Now? He teaches us." Hours passed, though time itself seemed reluctant to move. Goku sat atop the mountain, eyes closed, surrounded by an invisible sea of awareness. His mind stretched across the cosmos, touching stars, touching hearts. He saw Vegeta training far away, fierce as ever, but now there was a flicker of understanding in the prince's ki, a hint of calm between his blows. The legacy of the king lived on, reshaped by his son's pride and his rival's grace. He saw Gohan, gentle and wise, his aura pure and steady, guiding others toward light. He saw countless worlds where warriors looked to the stars and whispered his name, not as a savior, but as a reminder that even the smallest being could reach infinity through will alone. And finally, he saw Bardock, standing beside the king of old, both smiling beneath a red sky. "You finished it," Bardock's voice said. Goku's chest tightened. "No," he replied silently. "You all did. I just remembered." The spirits laughed softly, fading into the horizon.
When he opened his eyes again,
The world was unchanged, yet nothing was the same. The wind moved differently. The sunlight felt alive. He stood, stretching his arms toward the heavens. No triumph, no sorrow, just gratitude. He whispered, "Thank you for letting me be the echo." The comet's last light broke apart, scattering into 1,000 golden sparks. They fell gently like snow across the planet, dissolving as they touched the earth. Each spark carried the same vibration, the memory of choice, of fire unbound. Somewhere, a child would feel it and dream of flight. Somewhere, a warrior would awaken without hatred. Somewhere, a god would pause and remember what humility felt like. And in that way, the Saiyans never died. They became part of the universe's heartbeat, its eternal flame of will. As night settled, Goku sat beneath the stars. His aura faded slowly until only a faint glow remained around him. The world seemed to hum a lullaby older than creation itself. For a long time, he simply listened. When the last light dimmed, he smiled, not as a warrior, not as a god, but as a being finally at peace with what he was. Above him, the stars shimmered softly, as if remembering a story too beautiful to forget. And somewhere, beyond time, the voice of the cosmos whispered once more, "The fire that refused to kneel has become the light that never fades." The universe exhaled. The legend was complete.